Hi and welcome. For those of you new to my channel, I am Rachel Sloan and I am a relationship coach and certified NLP practitioner. And I work with women who love depressed men. I help them overcome emotional burnout so they can get healthy, get happy, and really live their best lives. And I know this is possible because it happened for me, and I am going to teach you guys on this channel the same tools and techniques and systems that worked for me. Today I want to talk about what I'm calling suffering in solidarity, because I think this is something a lot of us do, even if it's maybe subconsciously, right? It's like when your partner is feeling down, you get stuck in this like cycle of negative emotions, and you kind of feel like you should be there because it's not right, it's not fair for you to be happy when he is in so much pain. And I heard this put so well to me the other day by a woman who was talking to me about emotional boundaries. And we were talking about being able to separate your emotional experience from that of another person so that you're not all like tangled up in what they're feeling or what you think they're feeling. And she was like, yeah, I want to get clear boundaries with my friends, but I don't want that with my husband. I was like, really? Why not? And so she said, well, when he's in pain, when he's suffering, I want to suffer with him because that's what love is. And I thought, wow, that is it. That is what so many of us have somehow internalized, right? That love is like this incredibly profound version of empathy, right? Where like if our partner is hurting, if our partner's in pain, we have to be in pain too. We have to be suffering too. That if we are not, if we are experiencing a positive emotion while our partner is depressed, that means we don't love him or we aren't loving him in that moment. And I think this is maybe something that holds a lot of women back from wanting to really embrace thought work and learning how to change their thoughts and feelings, because they kind of don't think they should, right? They feel like that would make them a less loving partner. That would make them a less compassionate and supportive partner if they weren't suffering in the same way their partner is suffering. So I think this is such an important thing to look at, because the truth is that you suffering in solidarity with your partner is not helping him and it is not helping you. And so I really, let's break this down and let's look at what happens here, because one, you're trying to suffer in solidarity. You don't know what he's experiencing, right? He is suffering from depression. He is having a very specific set of emotions. He's having his own thoughts. To some extent, his feelings are also caused by his thoughts. But because he's depressed, there's also a chemical component going on, right? So his emotions are caused by the chemicals in his brain and to some extent by his thoughts. And you are not sharing in those brain chemicals, and you do not know what thoughts are running through his brain, even if he is very open with you about how he experiences depression, which honestly is quite rare, especially in our male partners. Depression is a very painful and personal and scary thing, right? It's hard to share even with the people you love the most. So you don't know exactly what he's thinking. Even if he's open with you, there's stuff that he is not telling you, and there are thoughts that he is probably not even aware of that are going on in there. So for you to truly suffer the way he's suffering, to feel what he's feeling, it's not happening. You are not going to feel what he is feeling. You are not going to think his thoughts. You are not going to share his brain chemistry. What you are going to do, you have a thought, right, about what he's experiencing, and that thought leads to a whole cycle of emotions that you come into. That's what I want to look at today, because we think we're trying to suffer with him, we're trying to be a good, loving, compassionate partner, but we end up in this cycle of emotions that actually has nothing to do with him, and it doesn't leave us any space to be loving or compassionate. And that is something that is so important to see, because your intentions are so good, right? You want to be a good, supportive, loving, amazing partner. But this whole idea that you can't be happy or you can't feel good when he's depressed, it's not helping you get there. So what happens? He wakes up in the morning and is having a bad day. You can tell. You can tell it's not going to be good from the first thing. And how do you feel? If you're like me, you probably feel anxious right off the bat, right? That's like my go-to. Oh no, here we go again. What's going to happen? Kind of bracing yourself, right? Like anxiety's boiling up. And then you start to worry as the day goes on, like he's not feeling better. How long is this going to last this time? Is he going to be able to go to work? Is he going to make it to that dinner party? What am I going to tell my parents about the holiday this weekend? Whatever it is, you start worrying and worrying. But you didn't notice already, this is not so much about him, right? This is you worrying about how you're going to keep your lives going, right? And what happens next in this cycle is we go from worry, and over time, it might be that same day or it might be later in the week, at some point we start to get frustrated. And we're probably trying to shove that frustration down because we know our partner's depressed and we know he's suffering and we don't want to cause him more pain. But we get frustrated because he's not feeling better. And we have thoughts like, if he would just see that therapist, or if he would read that book, or if he would just get up and exercise, I know he could feel better. And we get feeling frustrated because we want to help him, we want to change it, and we can't. And eventually that frustration turns to resentment because we think maybe he's like intentionally staying here, right, and kind of wanting to be depressed. And at some point, something like pushes us over the edge and we blow up, right? We get full-blown angry. And depending on who you are, that could manifest in different ways. You might yell at your partner, you might get passive-aggressive, you might just make some snide, nasty comment. Whatever it is, your anger plays out in some way. And after that, you kind of feel like an asshole, right? Because he's depressed, you know that, you know he's doing the best he can, and you were mean. So you feel shame, you feel guilty about the way you behaved. That leads you eventually right back into your anxiety. And now the anxiety might be more about like, less about his depression and more about like what's going to happen to your relationship. How are you guys going to keep doing this? Like this is tearing it apart, right? You get anxiety and into worry again, and we go into this whole cycle. Like it keeps going around and around. And the thing about this emotional cycle is that there's no exit point, right? It just keeps going. And there is no room for compassion. There is no room for loving connection in all of this anger and shame and frustration and worry and anxiety. Like, where's your time? Where's your energy to be compassionate, to be loving? You don't have any. And none of this has anything to do with him. You are having this whole dramatic emotional experience based on your thoughts about his depression. He is over here having his own emotional experience that you really can't know anything about because you're so busy being worried, being anxious, being frustrated, being angry, being guilty. You're having all of this emotional stuff. How can you possibly connect? How can you possibly hear? How can you possibly be open to what he's experiencing, right? He's having his whole own emotional experience over here, and you are so caught up in this drama, this emotional drama, that you can't see it. And the craziest thing that happens here is that a lot of times as your partner starts to feel better, this actually gets worse. The anger, the frustration, the resentment, they get worse as he feels better. And that is crazy, right? Because you'd think that if, it's his suffering that's causing you to have all of these emotions, if it's his depression that's making you feel this way, well, when he feels better, you should feel better, right? That's not what happens. You've been like kind of trying to damp down these emotions because you know he doesn't feel good. And then when he starts to feel good, they just all boil over. And that's maybe when you get really upset with him because like now he can take it, right? He couldn't take it before when he was depressed. You're like trying to shield him from how you were really feeling and maybe shield yourself. But then he starts to feel better and all that just kind of bubbles out. And so what is really going on here, right? We think that it's our partner's depression that's making us anxious and worried, right? We think it's his, excuse me, we think it's his actions or his lack of actions that make us feel frustrated or resentful. And The truth is that it's not anything to do with him. It's our own thoughts that are creating those feelings. So let's look at this cycle one more time. In the morning when you're anxious, what are you thinking? You're thinking, I don't know what's going to happen, right? That makes you feel anxious. When you feel worried, what are you thinking? What am I going to tell my parents about tonight? What if he can't go to work tomorrow? What are we going to do about money? It's that thought that is making you feel worry. When you're frustrated, what are you thinking? You're thinking, if only he would get up and exercise, he would feel better. If he would see that therapist, he would feel better. And he's not doing it. It's the thought that is making you feel frustrated. Remember, he's just over here doing his own thing, having his own emotional experience. You are up in here having these thoughts, having these feelings. And it goes on and on, right? It's all your thoughts leading to your feelings. It really doesn't have much to do with this guy over here. And when you get embroiled in all of this drama that you're creating for yourself with your thoughts, you can't be there for him, and more importantly, you can't be there for yourself. Because when there is not room, when you are so busy being anxious, being frustrated, being angry, when you're so busy with all of that, you get exhausted. You do not have energy, you do not have time, you do not have space to be compassionate towards him or towards yourself. And that's where that shame and guilt come in, and you start to get really hard on yourself too for having all of these thoughts and feelings. There's no room, there's no energy for love or for compassion. So what do? What is the way out of all of this? The most important step you can take is to start to take some personal responsibility for your emotional state. And I don't want you to take this the wrong way. I am not saying that you are doing something wrong. I'm not saying that it's wrong to get frustrated or resentful or angry. It is the most natural thing. We all do it. It's happening because of the way you're thinking, and that is okay. This is so common. Like, it's not you. You're not doing anything wrong. You just right now are kind of operating on autopilot, right? You have all of these thoughts that have been put into your brain over a lifetime, right? They've come from society, they've come from your parents, they've come from the news, they've come from the movies, they've come from your partner. You've got all these thoughts that have been put into your brain and dumped in there over your entire life, and you have been on autopilot just believing them, right? They come up, you believe them, you're like, okay, that's how we feel now. What you're going to start doing now is just noticing that those thoughts are optional sentences in your mind. And you always get to choose if you want to think something else. And I'm not saying that it's that easy. You can't just like flip a switch and now I'm thinking something else. There's a process, and in future videos we will get into some of the details of how to change your thoughts. But the first step is just becoming aware that your thoughts are there, right? When you're having an emotion, there is a thought. What is the thought? Can you identify it? Just bringing that awareness to your own mind is going to start to shift the way you're thinking. But that is where the work is if you want to start breaking this cycle and stop suffering in solidarity. Because when you're not really suffering in solidarity. You're trying to, right? You think you should be. But what you're going through, this anxiety, the worry, the frustration, the resentment, the anger, the shame, the guilt, that looks very different than what your partner is going through, right? The emotions that he's feeling related to his depression probably look very different than your anxiety, than your frustration, than your anger, than your shame, right? He is having a unique emotional experience based on his brain chemistry and his thoughts. And you are having your own emotional experience. So it is an illusion that you are suffering in solidarity. You are both suffering, but your suffering is taking you away from each other. It's not bringing you closer together. So if you can stop suffering so much, if you can take a little breather away from some of these negative emotions, then you will find the room for the compassion, for the love, for the connection that might bring you closer to him. So then, if he's suffering and you are not suffering, then you have the power, then you have the space to be there and be supportive of him, because you will have energy, you will have calmness, and you won't be reactive to his suffering. There's just so many benefits letting go of this idea that because he's in pain, you need to be in pain too. So I hope that this was helpful, and I know you are probably super eager to get in there and change some thoughts so that you don't have to feel this way ever again. But I promise you, the first work really is building awareness, getting to know your brain. So when you experience these emotions, just start asking yourself the question, what is the thought? Okay, I'm feeling anxious. What am I thinking? What is the thought behind this feeling? And it's a little tricky at first, but if you keep asking yourself, your brain will start to spit out the answers. And just remember, nothing has gone wrong. It's not bad that you're feeling this way. It's very, very natural, and it actually makes perfect sense based on how you're thinking. So, go out, start noticing the thoughts behind your feelings, and please share in the comments. I would love to know what you find out. When you're feeling resentment, what are the thoughts? What's in there? What about when you're worried? What about when you're ashamed? What is behind those emotions? Please share. I think it will be helpful not only for me to know how to help you best as we go forward, but I think it'll also be super helpful for other people watching this channel. Okay, stop suffering in solidarity. Start noticing how your thoughts are affecting your feelings. I will see you tomorrow.